people of the internet, and welcome to a new video. In this video, we're going to talk about the switch and how do we initially configure the switch. Now, the switch by itself has a job, which is to get those local devices to be connected together. Now, every time you have a room or a building filled with computer devices, like the one that we have here, for example, you need a switch, and that switch will basically be used to get all these devices to be able to communicate with each other. If we don't have a switch, basically, we're going to have to, I say basically a lot, we're going to have to make each one of those devices have a direct connection with the other devices, which basically is going to be, again, a big mess. So instead of all that, we do have a switch device which take responsibility of making the communication between all these devices possible. I'm going to create another video later to explain how does the switch work, but for now, we are more concerned with how do we configure the switch and change the default configuration. Now, we have two options. If you're using Packet Tracer, you can click here and click on the CLI, and that will give you access to the operating system here. There's another option. Imagine this switch is actually a real switch. What you can do, you can bring your own laptop. We'll just put it here, and then you need to use what we call a console cable. Now, the console cable will give you access to the switch operating system using this computer. Now, when you use a console cable, you have to click on the RS232 port, and then you go to the switch and you use the console cable. Now, if I want to have access to the switch, I can do that using a computer. You go to desktop and you click on terminal, you click OK, and here we go. This is my interface. And this is the switch. Now, the switch by itself, it's a computer device. But unlike the computer device that I'm using right now to record this video, this is a specific purpose device, which basically means it's designed to get a specific job done. Computers in general, the one that I'm using to record this video again, is what we call a general purpose device, which could be used to do a lot of issues, a lot of things. Playing video games, listening to music, writing a program, many. But Switch has one job, is basically to get those devices to be able to connect. It's what we call a command line operating system. That basically means you don't have icons and mouse. Everything will be done using commands. So you're going to have to write commands to configure the switch device. When you get the switch at the beginning, it's going to be the operating system is going to be loaded, and there will be one thing we call the default configuration of the device, which we don't want to keep. We want to change it, because if you keep the default configuration, that basically means everybody knows all the information related to your switch. So you need to change that. So the first thing I'm going to do here, I'm going to change the name of the switch. To do that, actually, before we get to that point, you need to understand that there's 4 modes in a switch. This is here called the user mode. If I want to move to the next level mode, it's called the privilege mode, and by typing enable, it will take you to that privilege mode. As you can see here, the simple greater than is changed to be the pound. Now, if I want to go to the configuration mode, you type configuration terminal, and that will take you to the configuration mode, and which is, as you can see here, now we have the word configuration here. Now, if I want to get access to those interfaces that I have in this switch, we have basically line modes, and we have interface modes, which I'm going to talk about later. But for now, we're just going to have a basic idea about what do we mean by those modes. Switch mode, user mode, basically is the first mode you're going to be seeing when everyone have access to the operating system. We need to protect that by a password, so we can say that if we don't protect our user mode by a password, that basically means anyone with a computer with a console cable, can have access to our switch. And if you have access to the switch, you will be able to have access to information, which we don't want anybody to do that. Now, when you tap enable, you're going to move to the privilege mode. Privilege mode mostly is about showing information about the switch, about the device. We can get some settings changed, but not that much. But mostly, the privilege mode is all about showing information. Now, the configuration mode is all about changing the main setting, the general setting of the device overall. Now, if I want to change the settings for ports, and by ports, I basically mean, let me just go here to the switch itself and see if I can have access to it physically. This is how the switch looks from behind. And every one of those that I'm pointing at are called ports. And those ports, I can change those settings of these ports and configure them, add a level of security to them. And that's what we're going to be doing. In the next level, So let's go back here. Now I'm in the configuration mode. The first I want to do, I want to change the switch name because every single switch produced by Cisco is called switch. I'm going to come here and say host name, and I will call it S1, for example. And here you see, I changed it to host 1. Now, the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to try to put a password for that user mode. To do that, you need to type line console 0. This will give you access. And what I'm trying to do here, I'm trying to have access to this blue. It's not blue wire. I don't know what's the color here, but this console cable here. I'm trying to set a password. So if anyone with a computer will need to give me that password. So after you type line console 0, you type password, and then you give it a password. I'm going to go with Cisco. That's my password. Now after that, you have to type login, and now you have a password. Let me just show you. If I type exit, that's how I leave those modes. And if I type exit, now if I press enter, immediately it's going to ask me about the password, which again, Cisco, and now I have access. So this is my first password. There's another password we can create. It's called the V2I passwords. I'm going to do it right now. So let me just go ahead and do that. Enable, configure, terminal. And then after that, I'll type line VTY 0 to 4, for example. Now, what is this VTY? This VTY mainly means that if somebody is trying to have access to this device remotely basically means, like, for example, if this network is located in Kansas City, and then somebody in, let's say, New York want to have access to the switch to fix it, because he's the only one can fix it, then if he can travel all the way here, he can use his laptop and get it connected directly and get the job done. But we don't want to ask anyone to travel all this distance. So what we can do, we can create those VTY passwords, which, in addition to extra more information, to be able to have access to the switch remotely. So I'm going to come here and say password, and I'm going to use the same password. Just I don't want to forget it, so I'm going to go Cisco, log in, and here we go. I'm done with those 2 passwords. Now, you're not going to be able to see the V2I password used right now. Let's go ahead and type this. If I type enable, now remember, let's say somebody was able to hack that password Cisco. Now, what we want to do, he will have access to the user mode, which in generally, there's not that much that could be done with the user mode. But what we want to do, we want to add a level of protection for the privilege mode. When he's going to type enable, he needs to be asked, or the user needs to be asked about a password. To do that, we're going to have to go to the configuration terminal mode. And then after that, we're going to type this, enable password, and I'm going to go class. This is what I'm going to call it. And I'm done. Now, if I exit again. Oh, I didn't type it right. Now exit again. Now if I type enter, it's going to ask me for the password, which is Cisco. Now if I type enable, it's going to ask me for a password, which is a class in this case. And now I have full access. Now I protected my system using those 2 passwords. What else we can do? Now, one of the things I want to show you here with this operating system is whenever you want to write a command, you don't have to write the whole command. It's enough to write a few letters. For example, configuration, config, TERM. And that will be enough. The operating system is smart enough to understand what you mean by that, as long as there's no confliction with other commands. Now, let's say I don't know how to do that. Let me exit, for example. And if you just type CONF and press tab, it's going to complete it for you. But again, if I just type CON and press tab, it's not going to tell me what's next, because basically there are 2 commands that start with CON, or maybe more. Put a question mark, and it's going to tell you those 2 commands that start with CON. I'm looking for configuration, so configuration, and now if I press tab, it's going to complete it for me. Now, what if I don't know what's the second word? Press the question mark, and it's going to show you all the options. Configuration, configure, form, the terminal. Well, we know we should go and use terminal. And that's a tool that could help you. Now, if I make a mistake, and if I press enter, it's going to immediately point. You see the arrow? It's pointing to that 0. It says you should not have a 0 here. So this is, again, another tool that can help you. Anyway, so we changed the name. We set all these passwords. Maybe I can change, put a banner, sorry. And to do that, I'll just type banner. message of the day, MOTD. And then you can put a message, any message. Access is not allowed. Just like that. Press enter. Now if I exit again, and press enter, immediately access is not allowed. That's a new message. And you're going to be asked about the password, enable, class, and now I have my password. Now, one of the things you should understand here, that all the passwords that I just generated here are basically a text, plain text. And that plain text is stored inside a file inside the store, inside the switch. And if somebody can have access to that file, they basically can have access to those passwords. Let me show you those passwords so you understand. So I'm going to go here and type show running configuration. I'm going to explain what is this in a second. But look at this. This is the password, which is a class. Let me show you the other password, Cisco and Cisco. So those passwords are plain text. And that basically means everybody, not everybody, but someone with some knowledge will be able to have access to that file and have access to those passwords, and then he can do whatever he wants. So our job is to do the following, and I'm going to write it down. You have to be in the configuration terminal mode. And this is where we type service, password, encryption, and press enter. Now, let me just go ahead and show that message again. And by the way, there's something called history in this operating system. So if you typed a command and you want to reuse it again, there's no need for you to type it again. If you go with the arrows up and down, it will show you all the commands that you typed. So here, show running configuration. And look at this. This here is encrypted version of the class password. And this is encrypted version of the Cisco password. So whoever's going to try to have access to those passwords, he will see this, and this will not work. So we protected our system. Now, there's another way we can protect our privilege mode using another type of passwords, and I'm going to show you how do we do that. So you go configure terminal, and now we type enable secret. And this time, since I used a class, I'm going to go with CIST. Okay. And I'm going to use this. Remember, CIST. Enable secret CIST and press enter. And then if I exit, before I exit, let me exit. Now, let me just go ahead and show you the running configuration. I'm going to explain what is this again in a sec. Look at this. I have now two passwords. This one, enable secret. Look at CIST, how encrypted that looks like. And look at this class. It's encrypted. But this encryption here is much, much stronger than the encryption that you have here, and also the one you have here. So for that reason, it's recommended to use this enable secret instead of enable password and then encrypt it. And now that I have two passwords, you should know that the one that you enabled with the secret keyword is going to be the one that you're going to be using. So let me go ahead and then just type enable. No, I'm already here, so let me exit. Now, Cisco, enable, CIST, and now I have access. So that's another level of protection. Why is it important to protect your switch? Because your device, if somebody from outside of your organization or your company or your house will have access to the switch, they can monitor the traffic of the data in that network. And that's how serious it is. So it's extremely important for you to understand that concept. Now, one thing that I'm going to be talking about two topics that this video will be over. The first one is if I go and type show running, show IP interface brief. This command will show me all the interfaces that I have in my system. Okay. Now, what do I mean by interfaces? Now, if I go back here to the switch, and as I said, show you the physical, those are the interfaces. So I need to know information about these interfaces. Let me just go ahead, back to my computer, back to the terminal. And here it is. This is show IP interface brief. There's a long list of show IP interface or commands, but now we're just going to talk about two of them. Look at this. IP Fast Ethernet 1 and 2 and 3 are connected to devices, and they are up, and the protocol up. That basically they're working perfectly fine. IPv 1 and 2, Gigabit Ethernet 1 and 2 are unsigned and they're down. Okay, that's okay. We didn't do it. And this is the part that I want to pay attention here, which is the VLAN. VLAN is a big deal. It's really, really important to understand. For now, I am not going to go into the details of what is a VLAN, but every time you see the word, the letter V, think virtual in networking. So VLAN basically means virtual local area network, number one. So what is the meaning of virtual local area network? Now, the device by itself, the switch, doesn't have an IP address as a unit, as a device. So what we can do, we can assign an IP address to that device using this VLAN interface. And then later, remember when I told you that somebody from New York is trying to have access to this device? Well, they need the password that we created, which is Cisco, but also they need to know the IP address of this device. Now, at this point, this device doesn't have an IP address. So how do I set an IP address for the switch? Is using the VLAN. And I'm going to show you how do we do that. And I'm going to use the same table that I had previously, which is this switch here and this switch here. So let's go ahead and do that. For the version 4, this is what we do. You go configure, terminal, and then you go interface VLAN 1. Now I am in VLAN 1. This is what we do. You type IP address, and the IP address was, here it is, this one. So I'm going to copy that. Oh, can I copy it? Yes, I can. So I'm going to come here and paste it. And you follow that with 255.255.255.0, which is the subnet mask. So previously with those computers, I was able to get the job done using the click here, click there, type that, type that. Here I have to do it with a command. So this is the IP address, the subnet mask, and then press enter. Now after that, you follow with no shutdown. No shutdown basically means enable it. It's disabled by default. You have to enable it. And now I got it to go up. Now, if I go and exit again. Now, if I go show IP interface, here it is. VLAN, this is the IP address, and it's up and it's up. That basically means I can now have access to that switch remotely from a device that's hundreds of miles away from me if I know the password and if I know the IP address. We'll see in the future how is that possible. Now, this is how IPv4 done. In addition to that, we need to set up the default, the default gateway for IP. So this is what you do. You go to the configuration terminal, and you type in this area. You type IP default gateway, and the default gateway for this IP address was this one here. So you copy that, and you put it here, and we're done. So we set up, now this switch has an IP address, has a default gateway, have a subnet mask, and has a password to protect it. So I'm done with that. Now, if I want to set up the IPv6, unfortunately, IPv6 is disabled by default. So to enable IPv6 to work with a switch, you need to enable it, as I said, because by default it's disabled. To do that, you have to go to the configuration terminal mode, and then you type SDM prefer, wait a minute, and then dual IPv4 and IPv6. This is the command that you have to type for you to be able to use IPv6. Now that, I forgot to mention here, I have to complete it with the default. So here it is, SDM prefer dual IPv6 default. Now you can use IPv6. So we need to go back to the interface VLAN 1. And I think you notice here, I don't have to write the whole word of interface. Just a few letters will be enough. So now I'm in the interface. Now I can say IPv6 address, and then I will go back to my table, and here is IPv6. So let me copy that, and I'll just come here and put it, past it here, and I should have IPv6 now. Let me just, again, you don't have to type no shutdown because you already did that. Let me exit again. Now if I go show, remember I can use the arrows here, but at this time I want to see the IPv6 information. Now if I press enter, you'll see that all these interfaces, they don't have IPv6s except that VLAN actually does have. Now, this is the IPv6 that I assigned to it. And this is what we call link local IPv6, which is going to be generated automatically for VLAN. Now, what is a link local? This is something we're going to be talking about later when we're going to be talking about IPv6 in details. But for now, you just need to know that IPv6 link local basically going to be generated automatically. You can change it if you want, but we usually keep it as it is. So now that we have IPv6, IPv6, assigned to VLAN, you may ask about how about the default gateway for IPv6 for a VLAN? Well, this is one of the things that you should know. I did a little bit of research, and then I found out that, and this is again from Cisco people, the people who created this packet tracer software. Here's a really important note that you should have a look at. It says here, to use all IPv6 features in this chapter, the switch or stack master, okay, that's another name we give for a switch. It's a different type of switching, must be running the IPv service feature set, okay? Now, this IPv server feature set, this is basically something that routers usually do. So again, if you have a switch that you want it to work that way, or a stack master, it has to run this IPv service feature set. Now, switch running the IP base feature set support only IPv6 statics, which is again not part of what I'm looking for. But here's the point that it's very important. Switches running the LAN base feature set support only IPv6 host functionality. So that basically means you usually use it for local communication. That's the reason why if I go back to my packet tracer and I try to do this, now I know I can type IP default gateway and type an IP address, for example, the one that I have, which is FE80::1. And if I come here and say version 6, for example, this is not going to work. You're not allowed to do that. So we're going to skip that part. There's no default gateway for IPv6 for this switch that we are using right now. So now with that being said, there's one last thing I'm going to be talking about here today is all this work that I just did by setting those IP addresses and setting those passwords and the banner and message of the day and all these settings that I just changed here. Basically, all of that will be lost if I don't save my work. This is, again, very similar to you typing on Microsoft Office Word document, for example, and then imagine there's no autosave because autosave is recently added to Microsoft. Back in time, there wasn't an autosave. So typing for an hour and then you lose power or the computer shut down for any reason, you lose all that work. So the same thing here. If you are working and you're setting up and you're changing the configuration of a network device, it's important for you to save your work. Now, this is how it works. There is two files inside your switch system here, or switch device. One of them is called the startup configuration, and the other one is called running configuration. When you turn this device on, a copy of the startup configuration is going to be moved from the permanent storage device to the RAM that you have in your switch. Now, that RAM will hold that running configuration file. Remember, I said two of them, starting and running. And the running is going to be there. It's going to work perfectly fine until you lose power or you turn your switch off. The moment you do that, you lose the running configuration. So when you turn your switch again, a new copy of the startup configuration is going to be moved to the RAM with a new copy of the running configuration, which hold the basic features, the initial features that you just changed. So that's why it's really, really important to save your work. And to do that, it's very simple. You just type copy, running, startup. And here we go. If I press enter, it says, are you sure you want to do that? Yes. And now all my work is saved. Okay. Now, just looking at how and do that, Cisco, enable, CIST. Now, if I just type reload, this is me reloading my operating system. Are you sure you want to do that? A few seconds, and I will get back to my original, to a new copy of the running configuration file, which hold the previous settings that I just applied here. So this will be the end of this video. In this video, I talked about configuring a switch. I talked about a little bit of IP addresses. Next, I'm going to be talking about how we configure a router and what is the job of the router. And then after that, we'll talk about IP addresses in general, and then we're going to talk about remote local communication. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys later. Don't forget to subscribe and like and share.